Hey everybody, this is the inaugural test podcast for AFR. The concept behind this idea is to try to get some experts to come on and talk about firefighting or EMS. Stole this idea from the Travis County, Austin, Texas medical director. He just gets on there and talks about what he wants his medics and EMTs doing out there in the field. So we thought it'd be a good opportunity to talk about things like that and also incorporate firefighting aspects as well. Like I said, we want to get some experts on here, and we are not those experts today. At least I'm not. So my name's Andrew. I've been in the department 8 years and have been rescue lieutenant for 2 years. How about you, Jason?
I'm Jason Fejer. I'm currently assigned to engine number 4. I've been in the department 11 years. Been a promoted lieutenant for just over 2 years now.
And I'm Eric Knight, lieutenant on engine 19. I've been in 17 years and been a promoted lieutenant for 4 years at Station 19.
All right. Yeah, so the idea behind this podcast, everybody, is, we'll have different topics each week. Today, we're going to try to just focus on how our perspectives has changed, going through the ranks, starting at pipeman up through driver and now as lieutenant. If anything has changed, how you approach the job, the stress you feel, doing the job. And I guess we'll start right with you, Jason. What do you think? How's your perspective changed as you've gone through the different ranks?
Well, I came in as a lateral. I was at a paid department before this. I had 5 years experience at the rank of firefighter and as a promoted driver there. So coming back, going through another academy and starting over as a firefighter, I think I had a pretty good base to start from, a pretty good understanding of firefighting and kind of what goes along with that. What I didn't have the understanding of was the call volume, coming from a department that didn't run the calls that we run here. So I think I was lucky enough that I had a good crew. I was at Engine 13 for most of my firefighting career. Had a good crew there. Had a lieutenant that didn't micromanage, which worked well with how I like to work. I got to work with a senior firefighter, so that helped. I was a junior guy at 13s for 5 years before I finally promoted to driver, so I knew it was time. After having previous 5 years experience piping for 5 years, I was ready to promote. I ended up promoting to the alarm room, which for 4 years I was a big commitment too, but I learned a lot. And actually looking back, I was lucky because I had that previous driving experience in another department. So I had all my IFSAC certifications. I've run equipment before as a over-the-road truck driver. So kind of missing out on the big chunk of my driving career here at AFR, I think I was lucky that I had previous experience. Not everybody might have that. Some of these guys take these support assignments and they actually end up losing kind of a whole chapter of their career. Not that they're not learning something else that's valuable that's going to help them in their career, but driving a truck is a pretty basic concept, and I think it does help when you go to that next level, especially if you do promote. And now being an engine officer, I've probably had the best time I've had in my career. I love piping, I love driving, but sitting in the seat that I'm sitting now, I think everything seems like it's kind of come together. My previous experience, piping experience, driving experience, my alarm room experience, it now seems like everything's kind of come together. So I don't know that my perspective has changed overall. I think my approach to this job is the same as it's always been. But I think I'm enjoying what I'm doing now more than any other point in my career.
Did you ever have times when you're piping or driving that you wished you were in charge of that call? Did you ever have certain officers that you were kind of just eager to get in that position where you're the one leading that truck?
Well, like I said, I had a good engine officer that would ask for feedback. So it wasn't, he would make the decision and that was final, but he never hesitated to ask, even some of his more junior guys or less experienced guys. So that was good. I never really wanted to be in his shoes, but I think that was a good example that he set. I've worked for other officers that were much more particular, not that they were micromanagers, but they wanted things done a certain way. And I knew that's not how I wanted to operate. So yeah, you take good and bad from both and kind of learn how, when I ever got in that seat, how I would operate. But no, I don't think I was ever, second guessing officers, or I've had a very lucky career with the guys that I've gotten to work for, that's never really been an issue.
Yeah. And you mentioned Kirtland, when you talk about the low call volume, give us an example of that call volume over there.
I think last year I talked to the chief over there. They ran 400 calls on the year.
Okay.
We have trucks that are doing more than that in a month. So that's for the whole department. You're talking, 4 full-time stations, 4 engine companies, a ladder, the airport side of things. So it was slow, but we did train a lot. That also, I talk about that kind of foundation coming in. We were highly trained. We have, there's guys coming over with IFSAC certs that some of our chiefs probably don't have. So we didn't have the call volume. We had a lot of training, and so I think that really helped coming over here, being able to actually do the call volume to kind of balance all that out.
How about you, Eric?
Let's see. I started off piping over on engine 3 for about 4 years, and then decided to make the decision to jump to the next rank, was driver. When I made driver, I'm like Jason, I got promoted to the alarm room initially, and I don't know if I embraced it initially, but I did embrace it after a couple months, realizing like how important the alarm room is and what experiences you have that you can bring to the field from the alarm room. Because as Jason knows, in the alarm room there is a rank structure within the alarm room, but you didn't get a chance to use that rank structure because sometimes everyone's on a 911, and when you're trying to make a big decision, there's no one there to help you, and you had to make that decision on your own. It wasn't a physical decision out in the field, but you had to get trucks going and make sure they got to the scene to where the 911 was taking place, and sometimes it was very challenging, especially the Arroyo rescues. Those are really hard to dispatch because you had to figure out what Arroyo were they in and what stations are going to go to that Arroyo rescue call. So it helped out a lot being in the field, because making those decisions, and as a driver and now as a lieutenant, what it's like to make those hard decisions and fast decisions. As a driver, when I made driver,
I got an input about the alarm room real quick. Sorry, if you don't mind. I always thought it's funny, like in paramedic school, they're always saying like, the dispatch is just a little piece of information. You don't really want to get too caught up in it. And I found almost the exact opposite is true. Like our guys at the alarm room they know what they're doing, and they've been in the field, like you said. So when you get that dispatch, like, you pretty much know what you're getting into. I think they do a good job of screening the calls, and they dispatch it, even if they're kind of required to code it a certain way. You can hear the inflection of their voice or whatever it is, that you know what you're getting into, if it's going to be serious or not, going on the call. Yeah,
I say for the most part is the guys that are in the alarm room, when they're I got promoted there in 2006. I know things have changed quite a bit, but it's still a 911 that comes in, and what guys got to understand is, the information, you try to give the best information as you possibly can that you can gather, and then there are some calls that you don't get to talk to anybody, and some people need to realize that when I was up there, a lot of the MVAs came through APD, and they just told us we have an MVA at a certain cross street, and that's all they told us, and they didn't say how severe or how minor it was, and sometimes it might be a rollover, but APD didn't give us that information, so sometimes we could only go off the information that APD gave us. And your shootings and stabbings, your rural, those calls for at the time I was in there, APD just said, hey, we have a shooting at an address, and that was all the information we were given. It could be to the foot, or it could, who knows what. So we try to do the best with the information that we're given. And sometimes that information may be rural bleak, and sometimes it's rural detailed. So the guys try their hardest to make that call as easy as for us as possible. And I did the same thing. And I hope that answers that question. And then when I made driver, what I learned from driving was I got to know the city a lot better than what I thought I did. And you learn all the, when I say tricks, like the different roads that get you through, the roads that don't get you through. There's a lot of dead ends that you didn't realize were dead ends until you go down that road and you're like, oh no, now I got to turn around. And then positioning the truck for structure fires, MVAs, and EMS calls. It may be a real severe EMS call, and you don't want to park right in front of. I learned not to park right in front of the house, because what if rescue or AS has to transport right away, and now I'm blocking the whole driveway because I parked the truck there.
That's always a problem, and even with the rescue out there, you know, you got 5-5 pulling up, you know, they're loading their gurney out of the back, so, you know, from my point of view is, why are you going to take their spot? Just pull down the road a little bit.
Yeah, and I think as a driver, all this is right through your head. You know, we talked about MVA placement and structural placement, but it's also critical on EMS calls on the engine placement, because, you know, if it's a medical call, you want to get the engine out of the way, or if it's something maybe technical, like something strange happened, and it does happen, that you may need equipment off the engine, now you don't want it that far away. So the driver has to take a lot of that into consideration, and I didn't realize that until you're in that position, and how much placement of the engine alone that you have to take into consideration. And your officer does help you sometimes if maybe you make a bad placement, and it does happen, and you learn that as you drive, that sometimes you make not necessarily a poor decision, maybe you could have done a better job of placing the engine, and then you just learn from that and you keep driving.
Yeah.
And
I always tell any paramedic students I have coming through is, you're going to mess up, and you learn from your mistakes. I mean, it's just over and over. Whether it's, you know, driving the rescue and you check and make sure you got electrodes for a 12 lead, but, you know, I didn't initially check for backup electrodes. So we'd run through a whole package of electrodes, and then now I'm out and I didn't have the backup. So that just starts going into your checks every morning of, you know, you messed up that one time, and now you're going to learn from it going forward. So.
Well, and I think like what Eric was saying too, all that stuff you don't think about when you're a firefighter, then you promote to driving. And I think that ranked more than any other. A good driver makes the job look easy, because you don't see them looking at the map because they know their district. You don't see them checking out their truck, but everything's always there. And or to just talk about placement. You know, placement. It's the stuff that you never think about when you're sitting in the back. Then all of a sudden, like he said, that's on you, and that kind of changes everything. But I think a good driver makes that job look very, very easy, and you don't realize how many things actually go into it.
That makes a rescue driver look good by following the engine.
That's right. See, those things too.
Yeah. Sometimes you don't know who to follow. And then what I also learned as a driver, that helps the pipemen when they're stretching line, and I didn't notice this until I was driving, was a lot of times, you know, everyone is, you know, especially at a structure fire, you're trying to get all the line out, and I've noticed a lot of times I tell new drivers, hey, look in the cross lane to make sure all of it was pulled out, because there's typically 10 to 20 feet is still in the bed of the truck, and so you know if you charge it, it's going to come flinging out of that cross lane and hurt yourself or somebody else. So I'd always look up before I charge the line, and I'd pull out the last 10 feet and pay it out, or I'd help the pipeman pay out the hose, so that way when we charge it, we didn't have the least amount of kinks, and all of a sudden it's just, you make it easier for the pipeman, because at first you think you need to put that truck in a pump and do all this stuff as fast as you can, and I realized that you can put the truck in pump and engage it and everything, and the pipeman might have started pulling the line off the truck at that point. And so you can actually slow down once you get into the scene. Make sure you put the truck in pump correctly, tank to pump, and then you're ready to go, and then help pay the hose, and you can charge the line. You can do it way faster than the guys can get the line out of the truck and on the ground to where they need it to go. So you can kind of I learned to slow down that part of the job. And then when I promoted lieutenant, I think through the experience of being a pipeman, the alarm room, and being a driver, definitely sets you up hopefully to be a good officer, because all the things are going through your head, you know, and not that like Jason, I didn't want to be a micromanager, and I would never ask anybody to do anything that I didn't do or wanted to do or whatever. So, and it's still everything's a learning process for the most part. So, I just tried to use those attributes that I learned from driving and piping and being a dispatcher collectively as an officer, and use that to, you know, to be a good officer and have a good baseline and make sure all that stuff was done. And if sometimes the driver doesn't park in the right spot, and I'd have to say, hey, can you pull up a little bit further, or can you block more traffic on the freeway? Because we know on the freeway things get, you guys cover the freeway, and so do we, and it gets sketchy out there. And I'd rather have 2 lanes blocked versus one, because my expectation, I'd rather have somebody go home versus somebody get clobbered by a car for.
Yeah, I think our department does a great job with that. We're not scared to block traffic at all. That's like, the last thought on most people's minds. So hopefully that continues. I came when I was 18. I worked at a place in Ohio, and I remember I dropped the paramedic lieutenant off at a car wreck. It was like a 10-car pileup, and then I drove like half a mile down the road just so I got out of everybody's way. And I came back, and he's like, "Where's all this stuff?" And I was like, "It's in the truck, half a mile away."
You're taking all the equipment with you.
He's like, "What are you doing?" So I was all worried of, are these people going to be able to keep driving on the freeway? And safety, obviously, is the main concern. And I don't care if they're in a traffic jam.
Yeah, and going back to the driver aspect, things did have changed in the department. When I first came in, the engine carried all of that, or didn't carry any extrication, and the rescue carried it all. So when we were going to an MVA, the priority at one point is the rescue's got to get further in than the engine, because they're carrying everything. Some people may think, oh, the engine's still because of the fire danger, but we have plenty of hose on the truck to get to somewhere. But who wants to hump over, a couple 100 pounds worth of extrication gear over to an MVA where you need it? So at that point, and it changed. Now it's shifted. Now everything's on the engine. So now the rescue guy's got to take in consideration that, hey, if this is something where extrication is going to be needed, the engine has priority of getting in there to get all the equipment there, and priority of the rescue. Where can we strategically place the rescue if we have to scoop and run once the patient comes out of the car? So that shift in where the equipment went on changes the dynamics for both the rescue driver and the engine driver on how they're going to place their trucks on an NVA now, and you have to take that in consideration. And when you hear the tones off, listen to it. I've learned, okay, you're already giving a size up from that dispatch of what you're going to do, where you're going to place the truck, and just knowing your district on how to access freeways or certain apartment complexes. I know a lot of apartment complexes had entrances off of another road. Now they're blocked off, and you can only get there from another road now because of whatever reasons, But
have you guys noticed that? You're mentioning just a MVA on the freeway, and now your thought is to safety. Was that initially as a pipeman, say, or as a pipeman, are you just like, hey, this guy could be trapped in there, we need to get in and check him out? And now as an officer, you're like, well, have your vest on so people see you, and then block traffic. So you mentioned that on MBAs, but also fires. Have you noticed that being able to have more situational awareness it kind of helps out with safety of everybody else?
Yeah, I think as an officer, Jason, and you can probably hit on this too, you do have more of a safety concern. Everyone should be thinking of their own safety, but the officer, ultimately, you're looking over everyone's safety and the scene. And as a pipeman, I just wanted to rush in, pull the hose, and let's do this, or on an extrication call, get the extrication equipment out. I wouldn't say I didn't pay attention to traffic, but you're more focused in on getting the equipment out the truck and start going. And like I said, your perspective of safety kind of changes as you go up the chain of command. And I think everyone has safety on their mind, but you have that broader perspective.
As on the nozzle going in a fire as a pipeman, what was your?
I was ready to just put out fire, and I didn't care what environment I was in. I wanted to feel the heat, and I wanted to put out fire. And sometimes the officer may throttle you down a little bit, like, hold on, are we in a situation that could get really bad and get someone burned, or are we in a situation that we can get a hold of real quick? And so as an officer, you start feeling heat and everything, and then you start thinking of the structure and everything versus what the pipeman's thinking of, and you got to take all that into consideration.
Yeah, being brand new, you don't want to mess up, right? So
you don't want to mess up. You
all right, I'm ready to go. And you're pretty focused on only one task and not trying to embarrass yourself, and kind of safety is the last of your concern. If there's somebody else, going that way, you're going to go that way, and most of the time you're not going to think twice about if it's dangerous or not, just because you're new, you're scared.
Well, and I think being as an officer, that comes into play. I'm much more aware now of just situations, whether it's on the freeway or a structure fire, than I think I ever was.
Or even, we'll go with medical, we're not talking about the 32 or down outs and stuff like that. You're more situation awareness, because you're looking at everything. Like, you're looking at all the people that are interacting with you at the scene. You're like, is this getting heightened or is it not? Are we okay? You know, you're looking for the safety on an EMS calls now too.
Has PD searched this person?
Yeah, does PD search the person correctly?
Unknown problem. Have they been searched yet?
Yeah, and that's most of what we do. They're mostly medical scenes, and like you said, it's almost like being on a fire where you're kind of standing back. You know, everyone's working, and you kind of have that situational awareness.
I think all three of us have been in that situation where, on an EMS situation where, say we'll go with an overdose, and it's kind of a sketchy area that you're already in, and you're kind of like looking around to make sure no one pops out of some room that you didn't know that they were there, and that could it's not a safety issue. It's just being aware, situational awareness, making sure that you're watching every little nook and cranny as this whole scene's going down, because you never know who is going to pop out nowadays. Times have changed, and you just got to be aware.
Yeah, and
we saw in Houston 2 days ago, things went south over there really quick, and I don't know the whole scenario, but it just shows you got to be kind of on guard almost all the time now.
And as a new rescue driver, my focus is, this guy, he's satin low, looks like he's blue, we need to get him, bag him up, get his satire, get a IV going, maybe give some Narcan. That's my that's my focus.
Yeah, you focus on the patient.
Right, so you're narrowed in on the task, and then as you, hopefully, and it seems like our department actually is pretty good there's so much experience that I never felt like I was in danger. Like going in as a new firefighter, like all our chiefs had, so many fires under their belt that, I felt comfortable that they're going to pull us out if we need to get pulled out.
Yeah,
so.
For those guys that are promoted to whatever position you're in, where you're a brand new pipeman, driver, or officer, either someone on the truck is pretty senior, they don't have to be the same rank as you, but they can help you along sometimes, because you got to fall back on your driver and your firefighters to help you out sometimes in situations that you just maybe not quite be sure of, and that's okay to fall back on someone that can give you some advice, or someone's rolling out the rescue officer, he's a senior guy, and he can go, hey, Eric, I've seen this before, we got to do this as this, and you may have not seen that as an officer before, so it goes back and forth. There's always, there should be more likely there's going to be a senior guy there to help mitigate the situation that you're in.
Oh, and I actually watched a podcast on the senior guy last night, and they were talking about that. And being a brand new promoted officer, I finally encountered that where I was the most junior guy at the highest rank. And it seems like every truck that I've worked on, guys understood that. There's still that senior guy that almost is kind of running the truck. Yeah. They're kind of setting the pace and not necessarily calling the shots, because I think everyone's still very good about respecting the officer and their decision making, but to still fall back on that senior guy to be able to bounce something off of him. The decision's still ultimately mine.
Yeah. Well, and it's great if he's doing the right thing.
Right.
So I would have no problem, man, you're doing awesome, but then it would get a little bit tricky if he does something that differs from how you think, and now you got to figure out the time and place to voice up and kind of get him in line with what you're
which
looking
is
for.
The hardest part of being an officer is the personnel issues. It's not like you were saying, guys are experienced, and on scene we do a very good job of mitigating whatever call we're on. It's you hear these stories of guys that have run into problems being in charge, and it comes down to exactly what you just said. When people on scene don't necessarily see eye to eye or agree on the decision, that's when things happen, and it's usually not something that affects the outcome of a patient or even a scene. It's that me and you don't necessarily agree on something. I was upgraded driving. It was right before I got promoted, and we had a working fire in district. We were first on, and I wanted to go set up in a different spot that the officer wanted me to. And so he told me where he wanted me to position, and I questioned him once. And he told me again where he wanted me to position, and I questioned him again. And ended up, listening to him, and we set the truck up and put out the fire. We were first due, and as soon as we got back to the station, he called me into the office, and he said, "Listen, I respect what you say as my driver." He said, "And you get to ask me once." He's like, "I'll afford you that, but you don't get to ask me twice." So I've kind of, I was still a firefighter upgrading to drive. And that's something that's kind of stuck with me all the way to this rank is, you can question me once, that's fine. We can talk about it, but you don't get to question me twice, especially not on scene.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about it later, we'll talk about it. And so it's kind of that same thing, that everyone should have some input, but that officer is ultimately the one making the call. And that's, that's the call that we're going to go with, whether you agree with it or not, whether you're the senior guy or not, I still respect your seniority and your experience, but I'm the one that's going to make that call.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I look back on my career, kind of like the arrogance, as, say, a driver. I had a great officer at 16s on the rescue, and, she pretty much did everything by the book, the exact right way. And at the time, I thought that I was, super important and really contributing a lot to that rescue. And then I started upgrading to rescue lieutenant, and you don't know that you're not a good driver until you have some really good drivers that are working for you, and there's quite a few in the department. So that's kind of a weird place to be. It was you don't, maybe when you're a pipeman you can see what the rescue driver's doing, but once you start working in that position, you're not working with any other rescue drivers. And right now it's mostly just kind of on the job training. So, you learn a lot once you start upgrading. You'll see the way different people do it on the rescue, and you're like, man, I really could have been a lot better at what I was doing. And at the time, I would kind of give this officer a little bit more of a hard time than I should have. And looking back, she tried to help kind of groom me in the right direction. And it's funny now that I'm almost pretty much run things the exact way that she did. So
right. Like I said, you could look back at any rank, whether you're driving and looking at the guy sitting in the back, and you think, man, I was not as good as I thought I was, or man, I did things the wrong way, more than I thought. And then same thing, like I said, I have a good driver right now who makes me realize, man, like I said earlier, he makes it look easy. And you take that stuff for granted until you're sitting in that next seat. It's stuff that you don't necessarily think about until it's time to make the move.
Yeah, and in my whole career, I held the driver rank the longest, and I think I was driving at the time for give or take 5 to 6 years already. And this driving for a long time on an engine. And we were sent out to, and this goes back to placement, we were sent out to a tractor trailer that was on fire, fully involved out on I-40. And I thought, hands down, I placed the truck correctly, blocked off traffic, not too close to the fire, we'll be able to handle this. And the officer at the time, a very senior officer, turned at me and said, "Hey, you need to back up the truck now or it's going to burn down." And because the side that I was on, I didn't feel any heat. The side he was on, he could feel it through the window. And sure enough, if I had left it where I'd parked it, we probably would have not lost it, we would have damaged the engine quite a bit. So I had to back it up quite a bit and realize, hey, that's because you've been driving for, or piping or driving or being an officer for so long, sometimes you're bound to still make, slight mistakes, and it's okay to have someone say, hey, we're a little too close, or whatever the case is. It's okay for guys at lower ranks to say, hey, we're in a bad situation, I think. And I always tell my guys, I don't know how you guys are, but I always tell the guys all the way down to rookies, if you see something that you think might be dangerous, bring it up, because if you don't bring it up and something bad happens, that's not good. So it's okay to bring up something of concern and then have guys look at it and go, okay, yeah, it's okay, it's not noted, or it's not that bad, or vice versa. Yeah, thank you for pointing that out, because that's bad. Maybe we shouldn't be in the situation, whether it be an EMS call or a fire call. So,
and how do you guys deal with the unexperienced situations where you haven't done this yet, but it's a possibility. For me, it's coming down to all the protocols. Like, the only way that I can try to stay on top of my game as a paramedic is just to read the protocol and do like a mental rehearsal almost of, if we get this patient, this is how I'm going to treat it. So one of the ways that I try to stay proactive is to just read the protocols. And now I'm in the situation where I've been upgrading on suppression side. I've got really little experience on the suppression side, so if I have to upgrade on the ladder, the only thing I know to do is to just go through our SOGs and read about it, try to talk to people about it, what should I do in this situation. But how do you approach, does that even apply to you, or have you been doing suppression so long that it's kind of second nature?
I would almost say it's second nature, but we all know that there's always a call that you haven't encountered. You may have thought about it, and there's not even an SOG for it, because we can't SOG every scenario out there, and we know that. So you try to gather, or you try to pull from everything that you've been to for that situation, and then you decide whether you need more resources. Or I always tell guys, a good resource, because you can't train for everything and you can't figure it all out. YouTube is phenomenal you can type in a scenario and you're probably going to find someone that talks about it and at least gives you an idea of, like, okay, none of us have experienced this, but I saw it on YouTube. I use it as a great resource for training the things that we just don't find, or we just are not going to encounter maybe once in a lifetime, once in a career, and it's going to happen. Everyone will reach a call where we had one. I personally experienced a call that I never would experience. Was we had a rollover on the highest flyover section of the Big I that involved 90 cattle.
Oh, right.
And you hear on the dispatch, and they even said it was on fire. Thank God it was not on fire when we got there, but it was on its side, and half is hanging off the bridge, and it does have 90 head of cattle, and they're all smashing each other, and you hear them.
You didn't go to the cattle SOG?
There's no cattle SOG, so what I did was, my first thing that popped in my head was the pipeman that I usually pipe with. I won't say his name offhand, but I won't say he's experienced with livestock, but he's dealt with livestock. And he was off duty, but I called him at like 4:30 in the morning, and I was like, "Hey, we have a cattle truck rolled over with 90 head of cattle, and you can hear him screaming and smashing and kicking the metal, and it's just ongoing." And he said, "Call the livestock officers," which I knew of them. I just didn't know, it didn't pop in my head to call them. And with your smartphones, you can figure it out. We call them, and that was, that was something that I would never thought I would encounter. And you do, and you just have to start thinking and think, and then call someone that you think. I landed upon someone that, if it wasn't for that, I'm gonna say it wasn't for that phone call, but that phone call totally changed how we ran that call, and
that also kind of goes back. Yeah, almost goes back to relying on that senior guy, not to make the decision or determine what the final outcome is, but know the resources that are on your truck. And sometimes, like you said, it's that guy that's seen it before. Maybe even if only once. Now you're that guy that if somebody else gets a cow truck rolled over on the Big I.
And there's nothing wrong with having to make that decision. Like, don't be so insecure in yourself that you can't say, "What do you think we should do?" You know all about this. So it's not threatening to your position. Everybody knows you're in charge, so don't be insecure.
Yeah, it's okay to humble yourself and go, "Hey, I need to find someone, whatever that rank is or whatever their position is or whatever, to help you. Hey, we're in a situation where I've never seen it before. What do you think?" And if I hadn't made that phone call, not that it would have changed, I don't know if it completely changed the outcome, but it brought resources in that livestock officers, that's all they do. That's their job. They work with livestock all day long, and they had resources to where to locate these cattle once we were getting them out, and the ones that had deceased, what to do with them. I mean, they handled their resources, helped us make that call go really smooth. And it was a big mess, and probably never see it ever again. But everyone has heard about it, so hopefully they can drop from that if it ever does happen again.
Yeah. I was thinking one more thing we talk about before we wrap this up is just, have you guys felt it different in like the stress levels you feel going to work. I have personally, like going in as a pipeman and then a driver, you know, whatever we get a rollover. I'm like, yeah, sweet. Maybe I can get a crike, or maybe I can do IO. You know, kind of exciting, just trying to build on my experience level, because I know, again, back when I was just a driver, I knew I had the officer taking all the responsibility. If I did anything wrong, you know, it would have been her job to correct me before I did it wrong. So now that you're in that position, you know, you've got that total responsibility of the scene, of the outcome. And most of the time when I'm at work, going on the calls, it's nothing that I don't feel like I can handle. But it's thinking about the unknown of like, hey, what if this happened and we have a bus full of 30 kids, you know, and it's some crazy wreck on the freeway. Thinking about that before going into work sometimes stresses me out a little bit, of having that responsibility on you.
Well, and I think that comes with rank, you know, like you said, piping was kind of carefree and gung-ho, and they said, man, you get to the truck, you do some house duties, and that's pretty much, you know, as far as it went. And then you get to driving, and now all of a sudden, you know, you're looking after that truck, and not only are you looking after the truck, and you know, which is a $500,000 to $1.5 million piece of equipment, you're also looking out for everybody that's on that truck. Then you promote to the next rank, you know, as a company officer, and now, you know, you're responsible for all of it, the truck, the people in it, the decisions that are made. And then not only that, but I think the only thing that kind of does stress me out as far as that goes is documentation of stuff, especially on EMS scenes. Fire scenes, man, I love getting on scene and taking command and giving a size up and all that. And you know, sometimes going back and I pull all the audio. There's been a couple fires where I pause, you know, where it's kind of like, what am I going to do next? You know, you kind of go back to training. What do I need? What do I see? What am I going to do? So the fire side of it doesn't stress me out, I think, as much as the medical side, because now not only are you in charge of, you know, essentially patient care, especially when a rescue's not on scene, you also got to make sure that you document it in a way that, you know, not to say that we're on the defense, but we kind of are, you know. So I'm kind of waiting. I've heard the stories, you know, where the car gets pulled or you end up in court and all that other stuff. So that's the part of it. When you're sitting down writing the report, you know, am I writing too much? Am I not writing enough? You know, is that who did that? You know, just making sure that everything's documented in a way.
And if anybody's listening, you know, going back 5 years before you promoted, do you have any advice? Like for me, I would just have, you know, again, taking that officer's offer. You know, she was like, hey, you want to take a call, you know, write the report? I was like, nope, not at all. Yeah. And then it wasn't until I, you know, went through the lieutenant cert and then I started upgrading, and now it's just like, now you're doing it all at once. And you could have kind of eased into it by doing a report, like one report a cycle. You get comfortable with the software, you know, you figure out that all right, I can do this a little bit, but I didn't want anything to do with that until I went through that.
I was the same way. As a driver, I don't think it was even offered if I wanted to do the report. I figured I'll do the report when I make officer. I'll figure it out then. And I think we're all on board with the same thing. I think for me the most stressor is documentation of everything. And are you doing too little? Are you doing too much? Or do you do just enough? It stresses you out really bad. And I think that's my biggest stressor is just keeping up on top of it too, because you know, now we're held to, you know, a time constraint now, and they want it done in a certain amount of time, which is a real short period of time, where 10 years ago you could do it almost like 2 weeks later if you wanted to, and that's changed. And documenting call, the ones that stress me are really not your severe calls, because those are actually easy to document pretty much. I mean, I think it's pretty cut and dry. A code blue is cut and dry. I mean, I usually document it for the rescue officer. It's easy. That is an easy thing to document. The ones that are hard to document are the fall at Walmart. Someone slipped on some clothing on the ground, and you're like, you know, this could get pulled or it could get looked at, and all of a sudden those calls stress me out more than anything else. You know, I think the severe traumas, and those are really easy to document, I think. But overall, the documentation of EMS calls by far stresses me out the worst.
Yeah, for me on the paramedic side, if you try and take your job seriously and do what you're supposed to do on the scene, like I don't ever feel guilty, even if they end up dying. If I did what I was supposed to do, like there's no PTSD from that. That's like, you did your job, you're good to go. So I would say to try to reduce stress is just try to be like well prepared when you go into work. You're not going to be perfect at everything, but you can train, you can get ready for that call before you go on it with a fire or EMS. So if you're training, staying ready, and if you have a call go bad, you're really not going to feel that bad about it. You're like, well, I've been training for the last month on suppression stuff. I've got nothing to feel guilty about. So when you're talking about stress, maybe for a bad outcome, that's the way I see it. Is if you're doing everything you're supposed to do, you can honestly look back and say, hey, I did what I was supposed to do on that call. I wish they would have called us earlier.
Well, and that's like, you've worked with me long enough to know, I think that's one thing as an officer I really, really focus on, is making sure that the truck and all the equipment are ready all the time, and that we're prepared for basically whatever we get called out to. We train a lot and we work on the truck a lot. And those are the two things I think that we can control that's up to us. Right. The rest of it we can't control.
If you want to see how you look, you've got to have that chrome so you can look like a mirror pretty much.
It's got to be polished. So yes, that's the one thing, like to manage stress, like you just said. That's how I manage it on that side, to make sure that we're trained and that truck's ready to go. And then you said that kind of eliminates a lot of the, well, I sure wish we would have checked that out, or man, I wish we would have trained on that 2 weeks ago instead of now that it's in front of us. So that'd be my only recommendation to anybody, whether you're piping, driving, or crewing a truck, is to train. It's the one thing that we can control. Make sure that everyone's doing their job, and when everyone does their job, it makes our job as an officer much, much easier.
Eric, you got any last comments before we wrap it up?
I think just as an officer perspective now, not trying to bear the burden of everything. It's okay, when you're at a station with the rescue and you're having a problem, going back to documentation on an EMS call, ask the rescue officer to help, not write your report, but ask you, does this look right to you, or what do you think? Add, change, delete. And that helps out too. I've started asking a lot of questions, and that helps out release some of the stress when you're documenting a report. I think just ask questions, and as an officer, doesn't mean just humble yourself. It's okay to ask a pipeman, like, what do you think? Or can you help me out with this? It's okay to ask for help. And I think that'll include myself, it'll probably alleviate a lot of the stress. And so it's okay to ask for help. You don't have to do everything on yourself. So ask for help. It's okay.
All right, guys. Well, I think we'll wrap it up. Going forward, some ideas we had about future episodes, maybe getting a real experienced ladder officer on here, because again, ladder ops are pretty infrequent. But for me as a rescue lieutenant, if I have to get on that truck, what's the main things that I need to focus on, and how can I prepare myself better? What other topics are you guys looking for?
I think we go on and on the suppression side, with all kinds of different stuff, but almost like in the station, we train all the time on suppression stuff, but probably trying to focus on some of the, just like you said, infrequent EMS scenarios. So, whether it's 7-8, whether it's maybe somebody on the rescue that's experienced a kind of unique call, we can go anywhere with this.
Yeah.
And as
mass
long as,
casualty.
Right.
Yeah.
Some of the things that Squad 2 has seen, from MCIs to extended extrications. I think we have a lot of good resources that have been relatively untapped up to this point, so this might be a very good medium to get people together, to exchange ideas, thoughts, discuss things, and I think this has potential to be very helpful.
Yeah, and the support groups. When I say support groups, the support divisions, arson, where they get them on here and hear what they're looking for. We always get it, but you'll give them a whole, maybe hour or 2 hours of actually talking of what they're looking for, FMO, what they do, and what we see that maybe you need to report FMO. There's a lot of things I'm like, should I tell FMO about this or not? I don't know. So FMO and all the support divisions, the alarm division, the training division, all those guys, and even from our higher ups, from the deputy chiefs and their perspective of the department and what they'd like to see and we can improve on and stuff like that to further improve the department as a whole.
Even some of the union executive board, to talk about from personnel issues, garrity rights, grievance processes. I mean, we could go anywhere with this.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty much as long as we can get people willing to sit down and speak, we could cover any base.
All right, everybody, if you have an idea, something, this sparked interest in you and you have a topic you want to cover, just email Captain Perea up at the academy. She's kind of going to be heading this up right now. So send her an email, what you want to talk about, or we might be out there seeking your opinion in the future. So thanks for listening and talk to you soon.